here's Ed Bernstein.
Well, we've talked about this before, but we're going to clarify some of the issues regarding question 2, which is recreational marijuana. And with me to do that is Rob Kampia, who is the Executive Director of the Marijuana Policy Project, and Senator Segerblom from our own Nevada State Senate. We just saw a commercial that is airing today, or between now and the election, I assume, where they talked about several different points. You know, and when you ask people why they may vote against recreational marijuana, because there's a lot of compelling reasons to vote for it, but when you ask people why they're going to vote against it, they'll always bring up one of two things. Either, hey, we want to protect children, and the other thing is we want to, they're concerned about more driving under the influences. So let's talk about the reality, the truth about protecting children, because when you hear about, hey, a child can ingest an edible and get sick. I mean, look at what's going on with bleach and Ajax and liquor and prescription drugs. I mean, this is not really a problem. Could it happen? Yes. The same way it could happen with a child drinking Drano, right, from the kitchen, underneath the kitchen sink. But what is your feeling about it, Rob?
Well, the Colorado state government issued the most important report on that question back in June. Marijuana has been legally possessed, consumed, and sold since January of 2014 in Colorado. So it was a nice 2-year study. The teenage marijuana usage rates haven't changed. There's not a crisis with kids eating candy and being hospitalized for weeks. Obviously, marijuana can't actually kill you. Even if you try to overdose, you can't do it.
So you can't, if you have too much marijuana, you get sick, you throw up, but you're not going to die. You're not like drinking Drano, which will kill you.
Right, and some people in college try to smoke enough pot to maybe die, and no one's ever done it. So it's actually impossible, even if you're a baby. That said, I think that kind of advertising doesn't work because it's a little too shrill. It doesn't really pass the straight face test, because unless you think of yourself as a really bad parent, which even bad parents don't, they don't think that way, you're not going to leave candies sitting around, laced with any kind of drug. It's the same thing as a prescription medicine bottle. Do you really leave a medicine bottle open in the crib? So it's not a crisis. It's, in fact, it almost never happens. The thing that I think this campaign has done well at is that when the opposition forces talk about phone calls in Colorado to poison control, and they talk about it as there being some kind of increase where the number went from 20 to 23 or some very low number. And then what you were saying, when children are eating Drano or laundry detergent, it's thousands or tens of thousands. And the difference between the two, as you just said, is that marijuana can't kill you and detergent can kill you.
Yeah. And of course, Senator, when you were drafting the legislation, you came up with, I think, probably the strictest, most regulated law anywhere in the country. And part of that concern was protecting children from getting into packaged edibles, right?
Absolutely.
How's that worked?
Well, right now it works great as far as anything you buy from a dispensary has to be in a child-proof container. The package itself cannot be attractive, and we're going to work on legislation next session that'll actually get rid of anything looking like a gummy bear or anything might even be attractive. But the reality is we're following Colorado. They're making changes, and we're making changes. But as Rob said, there's no record anywhere of lots of kids getting into things or using things or being hospitalized or going to emergency rooms. That's really a non-issue.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at when people talk in political commercials and they talk about the percentage of increase of children being calling poison control or driving under the influence, if something goes, as you said, from 20 to 23, that could be a 15% increase, and it sounds horrible, but it's not really factually relevant.
Right, that's right. So they play these games with percentages, and yet there's not the crisis. And I'm wondering, I don't know where they get the sort of the certitude to work on it, because if you have to make up numbers to justify your position, then why are you working on the issue? And the lies get worse than that. And you know, I can't believe I'm going to say this out loud, but the prohibitionists in the state are actually more honest than the prohibitionists in Arizona, for example. Arizona, they took the tack that the Colorado tax money that we said was going to go to schools when we wrote that initiative and passed it, the guys in Arizona say those schools don't exist. That's a really dumb thing to say because the school does exist and we have a photo of it. And so they, these people just keep pushing it farther and farther. I think in this campaign, they're doing a disservice to their viewpoint by making the candy the devil.
And I have a Denver Post story from, when is this? Earlier this year. Fewer people charged in Colorado with driving while high in 2015. There's actually less people that are being charged in Colorado with greater enforcement because Colorado police are more looking for DUIs, and there's less people charged with driving high in Colorado in 2015 than there was in 2014. So after a full year of legalization in Colorado, there's actually less. But let's talk about the issue for a moment, because when you are drinking, the alcohol stays in your blood system for a very relatively short period of time. When you are ingesting marijuana, it can stay in your hair or in your body for 30 days or more. So oftentimes people are being stopped and they do a blood test and you may have THC in your blood system, but you're not at all impaired.
So there's a distinction when people say that you could detect marijuana in the blood 30 days. They're not actually saying it's the active ingredient.
Right.
When you process marijuana, it goes from active to inactive eventually, right? Or you'd be high for a very long time. So what the scientists figured out a long time ago is they could figure out there's a molecule, the metabolite that's inactive, that tells you that you used to smoke pot. And with alcohol, there isn't that, or if it is, people just don't care. And so that's the misnomer. But as it turns out, even if you smoke a lot of marijuana, you're actually not going to have the active ingredient in your system for more than hours, not days.
Yeah. And when you were crafting the legislation, obviously you were concerned with the potential for people being more intoxicated while driving.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we went to Colorado. We've monitored what happens in Washington State, in Oregon. So we've looked at all these things, and at the end of the day, there really is no evidence that DUIs are up. In fact, DUIs are down, and the fact is that marijuana usage is actually decreasing opioid usage and alcohol usage. So it's actually been a positive for both of those states.
Yeah, and I have 6 kids, and they're all in that age category of 18 to 28. So having brought up these kids and living with their stories and their friends and their experiences, if kids want to get marijuana today, whether it's recreational or not, they're going to get it. And they're going to get it from somebody dispensing drugs illegally, drug dealer, and potentially that drug dealer is offering things other than marijuana, offering cocaine, heroin, pills, other drugs, and actually legalizing it and regulating it makes it more difficult. And it's my opinion, it makes it more difficult for kids.
It makes intuitive sense. Everyone has their own statistics, so I like to actually paint a picture. In Holland, for folks who have visited there before marijuana became legal in some places of the U.S., you would go and see marijuana in a store, a coffee shop, and there wasn't a pile of cocaine sitting there, right? And so you could kind of imagine that if you legalize marijuana and you put it in a store, maybe it's next to alcohol, or maybe it's just next to a T-shirt, you don't have the other drugs sitting there. And so I think a lot of people sort of intuitively know that it's not really the drug that's the gateway, it's the drug dealer who's the gateway. The
drug dealer. And there's another factor to that, Rob, because when you're purchasing from a drug dealer, you're now committing an illegal act, right? So you've crossed over a line, from legality to illegality. And that creates a lot of issues, particularly if somebody is arrested, right? Senator, I know you can talk about the number of people that get arrested for marijuana possession and then what it does to their futures once they're arrested and charged and convicted.
Absolutely. And the reality is, once it's on your record, you can't get a student loan. There's all kinds of things. The culinary union actually endorsed question 2 because they know that their members and their families have that issue with the police, and with having on their record, if you get stopped, it's a $600 fine, but you got to hire a lawyer. You have to go in there. Some people get into jail overnight. So there's a huge issue associated with it. And the other thing is, we talked about trying to get it. Type in weedmaps.com. You can go in there and it'll be delivered to you tomorrow or tonight.
Illegally.
Yeah. And you can also, we know in Las Vegas, from 5 minutes you can go outside and walk anywhere around here and you can find somebody who will sell it to you. But it's not regulated, it's not taxed, it's not tested, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to try to bring the system inside so that everything that we do is good, and the benefits for society as far as tax revenue help all of us.
We'll talk about the tax revenue in a minute, but talk about the testing for a moment.
Okay.
I mean, why is it important to test it, and how do you know it's safe?
Well, the reality is, what we found from other states again was that a lot of pesticides are being used in growing it, a lot of fertilizers, and those show up into the marijuana itself. And of course, when you buy it at black market, we don't know what's in there. But we have the best testing system in the country. We went out and looked at that, so everything here in Nevada is tested. And when you buy something, it's on the label, so you can see exactly what's there. But if there's any residue at all for pesticides or any residue for fertilizers, it flunks the test. Mold, any of that stuff. So the reality is, if you're going to use it, we have the best system.
And it also gives you the percentages of the content of the THC, the CBD. So if you're looking for something that can help you with arthritis, for instance, or with chemotherapy, then you can buy a particular strain that is high in a particular chemical components. And if you're looking for something that's it's just going to, like having a drink, it's going to relax you. You can look for something else.
And sleep. But the other thing about it is you go into one of your dispensaries, and there are people there are trained. So they will talk to you about what are your problems, what are your issues. Have you thought about this? Do this, look at this place. So and the people are so committed. The staff in the dispensaries are really phenomenal. So it really has been such a positive experience for Nevada.
Yeah.
That
New York Times recently did a story saying that throughout the United States, if you added up all the possession arrests in the United States, it's greater than all the arrests for violent crimes around the country. So we're using all this money for police forces, for court resources, for prisons, for jails, spending all this money for more than 50% of the crime is essentially, and enforcement is based on marijuana possession.
I think one of the things that folks need to think about in all these states that are voting on these legalization measures, and there's 5 states, is that there's no such thing as, as a free lunch. With any public policy, you're going to have to make choices. And right now, or let's say over the last 80 years, the decision that the government has made is that we don't want tax money, and instead we want to send the money to drug dealers. And we're not going to have any testing and packaging. We want it to be completely unknown as to what you're buying. You have to trust someone's word. And that we want to actually spend a lot of money on jails and prisons rather than schools. I mean, these are choices that the government makes. They don't use that rhetoric, but the money is getting spent somewhere. And so when you're voting yes or no, if you're voting yes in Nevada, it means you're voting to have people have legitimate jobs, to tax it and regulate it and package it. And if you vote no, even though you don't want to admit it to yourself, I will tell you, if you vote no, you are basically saying, I want it unregulated, I want it untaxed, I want the drug dealers to get the money, and they're not paying taxes on their salaries. I don't know why you would vote no, except if you're not actually thinking clearly, or if you've never visited places like Colorado. We were nervous when the government of Colorado put out their June report. We thought it might be like a June surprise. If it was a really bad report, it could have affected us, but it was a great report, and the governor of Colorado does not like us. He did not do it as a favor. And it was like, okay, well, this report's so good, we're in good shape. And that put the opposition in these different states, including Nevada, in a really bad position. So what do? You have to start really lying.
What did the report say?
The report said that marijuana use did not go up amongst teens. There's not
Right.
a DUI problem.
Okay.
It said all the things that we were worried about. And the thing is, we didn't ever claim when we were working on the Colorado campaign, we didn't actually say that all those numbers were going to work out in our favor. We just said that regulation is better than enriching drug dealers.
Oh, no question. Let's talk about the Colorado experience, because the most recent numbers I saw from Colorado for the month of August, Colorado sold $125 million worth of marijuana-related products. Mm-hmm. Now, Senator, you and I were talking that the tax in Nevada is
it's going to be 15%, but there's also going to be sales tax, another 8%. So I say around 25%, which if it were 125 million would be 30 to 40 million dollars a month just in tax revenue.
So that's close to between 300 and 500 million dollars a year that is available to go to our schools. Now, a lot of the opposition will say, well, the money's not really going to schools, but that's not correct, is it?
No, just the opposite. The fact is that the administrative cost is going to be very small because we already have that for medical. The local
the administrative costs as far as regulating the industry.
Right, running the industry. The police part will be very small because again, it's there. So at the end of the day, it is going to be primarily for schools. And the other thing about it is we have this huge tourism base. Colorado is making a lot of money on tourism, but we have 40 million tourists just here in Las Vegas. If those people came in and used this, and they already used it, if you go to a concert in Las Vegas, you're going to smell some marijuana. But now we're going to sell it and we're going to make tax on it, and that's going to help fund our schools and other things. So,
and keep it safe. I want to ask you about the pharmaceutical industry, because look, there's money going in all these states that are trying to get medical marijuana or recreational marijuana. Is it the pharmaceutical industry is against marijuana?
So, there's been this kind of feeling in the air for the whole 23 years I've been working on this issue, that the pharmaceutical industry, the tobacco and alcohol, have all these lobbyists roaming around Capitol Hill working to keep marijuana legal. I've never seen one of those lobbyists. Yeah. And there's never, and then also in Nevada, these people aren't working. But for the first time, there's real money against us in Arizona. There's a pharmaceutical company that actually put in their business plan, that's a public document, that they didn't want to see marijuana legal because it was going to interfere with their ability to sell. They only have one product.
Opiates?
Yeah, it's an opioid. It's fentanyl.
Which is a strong opiate.
100 times more than regular.
I just learned from someone yesterday that was the one that killed Prince. I can't verify that, I didn't look it up, but we know it kills. So that's their drug. And their second drug that they want is, in fact, a marijuana-based prescription medicine. And they said we can't have legalization because our business model goes down the tubes. So they've donated $500,000 for the opposition so that they can actually continue arresting large numbers of brown and black men so they can keep their business model.
And every drug that we have created and that the pharmaceutical industry sells derives somewhere from a plant. So here it is, we're talking about marijuana. This is the most natural of all these drugs compared to what the pharmaceutical industry produces, basically. Yeah. And their concern about it is really just financial. They want to control that market, and they're not able to.
Yeah, I mean, I think this particular company, it's not a diversified portfolio. So they're just not. They're vulnerable, and they're willing to throw, millions of Arizonans under the bus to sort of struggle to keep their profits.
Right.
But they take one little ingredient out of the marijuana, put it into a pill, and then you take so many pills, so many hours. Whereas with marijuana, you have the whole plant. You can pick different plants to do different things, but it's all natural, which is what we all want to start with.
And you talk about marigold, and that's not really has not really proven to be very effective anyway.
No, because it's just one little piece of it. No, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Another thing I've heard is the private prison lobby is put money into anti-marijuana, which again tells you, the people that are making money on marijuana with the current system are the drug companies and the police and the fire, police and the prison system and the defense lawyers. The defense lawyers, who are my friends, are the ones that are going to really suffer if Question 2 passes, because a lot of their business is just going to be gone.
Yeah, the commercial we showed also talks about the police being freed up to really focus on violent crimes and not dumb marijuana possession crimes. That's going to be a big factor too. It
is going to be a factor. I think a lot of folks, when they think about these issues, it's hard to sort of imagine how it affects your real life. But the police do have limited resources, and the police are actually saying that all the time. And how does this affect your life? Well, I'll give you one example. Have you ever had your car broken into and you call the cops and nothing happens, really, they're not going to investigate if they're not going to.
We stopped in Nevada. We stopped investigating car accidents for a while because we didn't have the police resources to investigate car accidents. People would get into a fender bender in the freeway, and fist fights would be breaking out because the police were not there to control the situation.
This is what I mean.
Yeah.
And
they're
I
trying to bust somebody for having a joint.
Right. Taking somebody who has a joint over to spending, what, 3 hours, takes them 3 hours by the time they arrest to file the reports and bring them down to jail. I'm sorry, Rob.
Well, it's just, again, it's choices. You know, do you want the police to arrest marijuana users or someone else who's actually committing a real crime? That's your choice. You get a choice on November 8th. You get to actually choose to allow the police to do what they actually say they want to do. The police really don't enjoy kind of hassling people who are not hurting anyone. We have talked to many cops who want to have the ability to ignore marijuana once it's actually treated like alcohol.
You know, what I find very interesting is that sometimes you look at the people who are against us, and sometimes they're Republicans or libertarians. And when you really flesh out, okay, what is your political philosophy? I mean, libertarian isn't the whole thing, hey, keep government, out of our private lives. And the Republican philosophy typically is, hey, let the states decide, keep the federal government, away from mandating to the states what we have to do. It doesn't make sense to me that these people with these philosophical beliefs would be, anti-legalization of marijuana. Some people. A lot of them are.
Well, but especially in Nevada. I mean, we've always been like, federal government, stay away from us. And whatever, if I do something that doesn't harm anybody else, I can do it to myself. And we have prostitution, we have alcohol, we have cigarettes, we have gambling. Kids going to school walk past 3 7-Elevens with slot machines in them.
Right.
So I mean, to think that somehow or other having recreational marijuana is going to all of a sudden destroy Nevada is just ridiculous.
Well, is there information about how gaming may have made developed gambling addicts into teenagers? I mean,
no,
and it's just not happening here, right?
No, exactly.
Yeah.
But the reality is, when you're a parent in Nevada, you have to tell your kid, explain to them all these things, and they have to grow up with it. But I said that's the unique thing about Nevada is you go to Smith's, there's slot machines in the Smiths. I mean, we are totally exposing kids to all kinds of things which other states wouldn't allow. But at the end of the day, that's where kids grow up and they learn to do things sensibly.
I want to talk about veterans because, look, this medical marijuana has done some amazing things for our state and for our citizens, particularly when I look at what the average customer in a dispensary, is 55 years old, and so many of them are veterans either from Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam, and at the same time, there are so many elderly people with cancer, Parkinson's, MS, glaucoma.
Or just get up in the morning and have a hard time moving.
Yeah, arthritis.
Exactly.
Which you hit a certain age, everybody's going to have.
I was going to say,
right,
I have that one.
Right, I mean, so like we have no problem taking, Tylenol or, anti-inflammatories, and so often medical marijuana is less serious than taking these kind of medicines every day of your life.
Absolutely. I mean, you can't overdose on it, and that's an important thing to know. I was just talking to a veteran last night, and it was sort of a casual conversation, so it kind of jarred me. In the midst of it, he said, I still have post-traumatic stress disorder, and I was like, okay, I understand that. And then he said, I was with 15 men who died in Iraq and Afghanistan, who were my buddies. And I got back to the U.S. after 3 tours of duty, and now it's 22 who died in the U.S. And I said, what did they die of? And he said, it's slightly more than half have died of an opioid overdose, and then the other half, give or take, died because they committed suicide, which means post-traumatic stress disorder. Right. And those are the two things. And so when we talk about veterans should be able to get access, we're talking about pain, we're talking about post-traumatic stress disorder, which is very real, and we're also talking about folks who are now addicted to the prescription medicines to treat their pain. And the ad that the campaign here was running just a couple weeks ago featured a veteran who was addicted to these opioids that are legal, and it almost ruined his life. And the interesting thing is that the Veterans Administration the doctors don't talk about marijuana, and so he didn't even know it was an option. And then when he figured out it was an option, he was able to get completely off of the addictive drugs, and now he takes a drug that's actually not addictive. So that's a win for him. Problem with veterans is that first, the doctors can't be honest. And also there's a problem, which is that if you actually test positive for marijuana as a veteran, you're going to get bumped out of the system, you're going to lose your benefits. And also I should note that medical marijuana is only legal in 25 out of the 50 states. So if you're a veteran in the other half of the states, places like Texas, you don't even have any argument at all. You just go directly to jail.
And of course you cannot cross state lines with marijuana, because it's still not, you're not able to do that at a federal level, cross state lines with. And I should say this question too, by the way, it does not impact at all an employer's right to make decisions on usage for their employees. So the employer, if they want to have a drug-free policy, they can.
Yep.
Right? And there was something else on that which I wanted to bring up. You can't fly with it either.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The thing is that when we say the slogan is tax and regulate marijuana like alcohol,
right.
The reason that the team chose that is because you can kind of picture what that looks like. If you just use a word that's sort of not defined, like legalize, what does that mean? It could be like, you know, tobacco or whatever.
Right.
So when you say regulate, people would, I hope, would usually, if you think about it, want it to be regulated rather than all over. But when you picture alcohol, you say, okay, I know what that is because it actually has problems.
Thank you very much.
But it should be legal.
Rob Kampia, thank you, Senator Tick Segerblom. Hey, let's get the money out of the cartels and into our schools.
Right on.
Living in Nevada is great, but as a mom, I worry about my kids, especially when they're out there in the world. We hear about it all the time. Drug dealers selling on the street is dangerous for our kids and for our families. Voting yes on 2 to regulate and tax marijuana for adults means stricter control and fewer drugs on the street. We know it works. In other states, the police spend their time fighting serious and violent crimes. It's Nevada's turn. Vote yes on 2.
When sorry is not enough. Enough said. Call Ed. EdBernstein.com.